This is my video resume, not a three-part version that wanders, but a one-part version where I first lay out the key periods and then I come back later to deal with it. The first key period is when I was in elementary school reading serious physics and mathematics books and going through 15 or 20 calculus books when I discovered what trigonometry was, and teaching myself calculus in elementary school, and the beginnings of real math in terms of analysis of real numbers, the elementary topology, number theory, cantor set theory. The second period is 3 high school programming jobs for summer 3-month jobs. That was a Fortran program, an APL program, and a Lisp 1.5 program, completed for real customers. Then there was the issue of going to MIT and finding out that the computer science faculty were not smart and had been bought off by IBM equipment, and the computer curriculum was very disappointing. But that there were very smart graduate students in computer science in a place called Project Mac working with DEC equipment and not IBM equipment on real computer science and not bank information processing. And so I spent 5 years working with them, helping the graduate students there, and learned enormously more than I would have from some out-of-date courses taught by pompous directors of IBM in the daytime. The third area was realizing that MIT as a culture had a lot of cowardice in it that was hiding behind math. Now, I was really, really good at math, so you couldn't hide from me in math. And so I saw through the courses where the professors couldn't think and used math as a substitute for thinking. And I would still say today, 50 years later, that it's an accurate characterization of MIT faculty as a whole as that cowards hiding behind math. There's not a lot of clever thinking in a lot of those MIT faculty. And their math models hide from ignorant public the fact that they are not really doing much thinking. But if you know math, you look at the models and you laugh. You simplify all of reality away from your model, you can get some beautiful math that works really well. It's a pretty simple game. It's sort of the economics game. Let's assume humans are rational utility maximizers, and that'll make our topology work out, and we can get one equilibrium clearing the whole economy's prices. Ken Arrow's Nobel Prize. Well, that's all in the assumptions. You set up the assumptions that way, then you can get your math to work. But it has no relation to reality, as 2008 demonstrated. So the second thing was this culture thing at MIT. The third thing was going to Wellesley and getting into creative writing, discovered that courses at Wellesley were far harder than MIT courses. And there wasn't a math place to hide behind at Wellesley, so you had to really think. And of course they had distortions and bad professors there, but in general the thinking was harder. And the mental work required was harder. And the stretching of your brain through language was much tougher. And the being precise about it, precisely the things that humans are not naturally precise about or honest about, was more challenging at Wellesley. So there was an ethical, cultural power that it required that MIT didn't require. The third thing was trying to fix all of this stuff. The weakness, MIT success, maleness, and the cowards hiding behind math who didn't know what they were saying. Fixing that, and then fixing the weaknesses of humanities at Wellesley through turning Asian, really, through Huston Smith, Nathan Sivin, Gary Snyder, Daisetzu Suzuki visiting, and doing zazen meditation and then Taoist daily living on MIT with my last 2 years there. That was another item, a key period. Another key period then was joining an global development NGO located in the 104 poorest villages and urban neighborhoods of the world that was run by an ecumenical religious order that was using existential theology instead of following old book theology. That was really interesting. And the first job I got after MIT, and I had already decided to work without pay, the first job I got for 6 years was working in this development NGO staffed by an ecumenical religious order all around the world. My first job was to visit the 2,000 richest Americans, raising money from them. And that changed my life in ways I've described in other tapes. The next period of my life was using the NGO and religious order to get out of the United States, which I felt was essential for my education. Being in one nation was making me stupid. and I needed to get as far away from American ways and thoughts as possible. In Japan, it was globally powerful, destroying Western industries and 11 different industries around the world with total quality power, and I wanted to find out what made them powerful and why they were different. And so I worked to solve. Fortunately, I was a hero at solving problems with this NGO's mass workshop meetings and business venture design workshops and stuff like that. So I was sent to Asia by this NGO and ecumenical religious order to fix busted programs there, which I did. And I ended up in Taiwan, Korea, and Japan, generating 42 400-person each citizen planning meetings, an 800-person consult that designed 16 businesses in 10 days in Hokkaido, a project in delivering Japanese mowers to a poor Korean village that tripled village incomes in the poorest villages of Jeju, Korea, and in general, finding out that the World Bank and the male approach to development didn't work anywhere, and that if you listened to the women, you found out where the leverage points were. Then I met a Japanese. Then I decided to, while I was being in Japan, to learn Japanese quality from 2 Deming Prize winners. So I worked for Matsushita Electric, which won the Deming Prize, setting up AI programming for them. And then I set up AI circles in Sekisui Chemical to help them win the Deming Prize, leaving Matsushita because Matsushita had already won the Deming Prize, and I wanted to see how it's actually done in real time. And Sekisui was applying, so I went there to see how it actually was applied. Matsushita was kind enough to let me go. And I let my AI circles help Sekisui win the Deming Prize in Japan. And then I decided to, with my Japanese wife, to go to the University of Michigan, where she needed to study for her career. So I shut down my career and went to the University of Michigan with her. And it was really useful because I found out social science thinking was much tougher and more challenging to the mind than the arts and creative writing had been at Wellesley. And that was much harder for the mind than the hiding behind math little adolescent boys in 40-year-old bodies, professors at MIT. The MIT adolescent math stuff was the easy stuff, and it became a big hiding place for lazy, cowardly men. And Wellesley didn't have that hiding place, so they had more men who actually had to think well. And then the University of Michigan had much harder things to think about than the arts had to. And so that was a different challenge. They had to find truth in the social science area. That's tough. Anthropology, sociology, political science, social psychology, that's tough. And then the Santa Fe Institute got involved in 2 of my seminars at the University of Michigan, graduate research seminars, Joanides and in social psych, and Holland in genetic algorithms. Both of them together sent students to the Santa Fe Institute to help set it up. If you understand Michigan weather, you know why they chose Santa Fe. And so went down there, and that was another key period. Then at Michigan, I did consults, hugely important consults that I never intended to be important, for General Dynamics, for Brunswick Corporation, for the National Manufacturing Association, for a whole bunch of big organizations, for Procter & Gamble Corporation. And I began doing public speaking and trained myself in good public speaking. So I went from the worst speaker at events. Within 3 years, I was the top-rated speaker on all-day workshops run only by me for 850 people, with 9.7 out of 10 as the average scores. So I really taught myself in 3 years how to be top-rated at public speaking and speech making while I was a graduate student at the University of Michigan. In fact, my first conferences, I didn't know what an academic conference was, and I saw posters on the wall for them. So submit an abstract. I had no idea you could submit just 300 words. So I saw this work with display units 86 poster on the wall, and I submitted 3 abstracts to it, and then it was in Sweden, forgot all about it. The 1986 consult and conference. And then 8 months later, got this strange letter in the mail that all 3 of my abstracts had been accepted for oral presentation at this conference in Sweden. I had to go to a map to find out where Sweden was. And what you're really supposed to do when you present there. I had to struggle like hell to develop abstracts into real papers and review literature and come up with a model and improve all the existing models and then test my model with some data. It was 3 papers done in a crash emergency program while trying to find enough money to go to Sweden as a poor graduate student. But I found out I was good at that stuff. Real good at that stuff. It was my natural talent. And Then another period that was after the University of Michigan, testing all of my ideas from creative writing, from artificial intelligence software at MIT and Project Mac, from social sciences at the University of Michigan, from Santa Fe Institute, new, updating, going beyond MIT Forrester style systems thinking, and the Japan total quality stuff, to take those 5 bodies of knowledge and mix and match them, and do they have power when you just take these ideas, apply them in industry? And so I had gotten hints at Sekisui and Matsushita that they work powerfully, but that was a foreign environment. I needed to prove it to myself in my own environment. So I went to EDS and amazingly had success there. And then immediately went to Coopers and Lybrand Consultants and amazingly had success there. And then went to NV Phillips and Thomson Electric in Paris and amazingly had success there. And then went to Xerox for 5 years in every single row, met the chairman, got more money in headcount, and amazing success every year, 5 years in a row with the same methods there. So I proved in Europe and America, as well as the 2 prior cases in Japan, that this intersection of these 5 bodies of knowledge have enormous power, just as an idea basis in global corporations. And they have power in Asia, they have power in Europe, and they have power in America. And so that gave me authority to teach powerfully and to guide students powerfully, because it wasn't just theoretical ideas. These ideas actually work when rubber hits the road. You put them in a nasty human jungle of monkeys fighting to be important and make themselves rich, and the ideas work in that nasty environment. So that corporate test phase was a phase by itself. And in the middle of that, I got this phone call while I was at Xerox PARC one day, 11 o'clock at night, from this dean at the University of Chicago, who said that my book, Global Quality, was a work of genius and they wanted to hire me for their faculty. And I was just totally unprepared for that. I thought university pay scales were shitty and their computer systems were awful. And a lot of the faculty had this religion of Milton Friedman worship and didn't really think. And so I wasn't sure I was going to be able to tolerate an intellectually low-level environment of bad computer systems, bad thinking, religious worship of some male, and in these business schools. And you know, the idea of a business school doesn't strike me as an intellectual environment to begin with, and then to have these religions worshiping the ass of some famous male like Milton Friedman in a totally maniacal, humiliating, disgusting way doesn't inspire thought either. And then at Harvard and University of Chicago, you can't say any ideas publicly in the hallway or in conversation because they get stolen by other professors and show up as graduate student papers of those professors 6 months later. So it's a very unintellectual hallway environment at University of Chicago and Harvard because of the ugliness of competition there. And ugly people go there, that's why the competition is ugly. But nevertheless, there were some wonderful people at Chicago. Harry Roberts was a generous, open, wonderful soul, founder of the business school at the University of Chicago, founder of the American Statistical Association. Al Madansky was a wonderful man, the exact kind of vision that Chicago doesn't have the guts to follow now. The leader they need, but they don't have the guts to follow him. The genius that's sitting there on the wings, ready to move them where they need to go, and they're too religious and weak to face what the mind presents as a challenge and follow it. Madansky's a hero. So they're great people there, and it was a thrilling place to be, and the students were great. And the intellectual issues that I found once I settled myself down, you know, I didn't have anything immediately to research, so I would put my Chicago career as the first 2 or 3 years simply learning how to reorganize everything in my life and then intellectual framing so that professors could like it and students could be guided by it. And then the second phase of the University of Chicago was the discovery of something that was actually worth researching, which was redoing Plato, redefining the excellent and the good for our age, but to define it empirically rather than philosophically. My excellent science research project, and I found 54 ways to the top of any field from that 8,000 people we interviewed in those 7 years. And that was a real starting point that I could do research, and that my research was going to be more fundamental than what journals liked or wanted, that I was going to be operating on a 1,000-year scale research question and not on a last year scale research question. And then at the University of Chicago, my wife got sick, terribly sick, and in a lot of pain, and boy, it was scary, and we had to cure her. And the first step was shut down our career. Both of them, she was at the University of Chicago too. We shut down a career. We dropped to a university in Japan, 460 ranks lower. Can you believe it? And boy, it looked it too. I mean, faculty who didn't do any research their entire lives, students who didn't read books. And we both went there, and as best we could, we established world #1 norms among our research seminar students. And for a while, it worked. For 6 or 8 years, we could take average Japanese students there and turn them into top 1% performers mentally, because the difference between the top and the middle is not really that high. It's grossly exaggerated for monkey rank and hormone reasons. But actually, there's just 1 or 2% difference in mental performance and speed. And so you give us an average set of students, we can turn them into geniuses fairly quickly. And so that's what both of us did. And we really did turn them into geniuses. And we really did outperform the school. I got my students in jobs at Mitsubishi Shoji, the first ones in the school's history. I got my students jobs at Johnson & Johnson, at Procter & Gamble the first time in this. They were only getting jobs at Tokyo University until I came along, and from this low-ranked Japanese university got my students jobs at Procter & Gamble. Not only that, but my students at Procter & Gamble became the top marketers in all of Asia for Procter & Gamble by violating a 100-year-old rule and tradition in Procter & Gamble about how to market, inserting Lever Brothers style celebrity marketing into P&G style data marketing, because they saw the web was going to do the data thing that P&G had been doing, and everybody would have access to it on the web, and therefore you had to have some distinguishing thing. And they moved to the art design side for the distinguishing feature, and that's how my students became the leaders at P&G Marketing Asia. P&G is still not absorbed that in Cincinnati. They're afraid of that. They're afraid of change. Although Larry Houston's a hero, trying and kicking down there in Cincinnati, trying to get them to change. Then while I was in Japan, we were trapped for 14 years in an environment where the only thing I could do was write books, because I couldn't even leave home because my wife was in so much pain she couldn't cook for herself or even walk some days. So for 14 years I was trapped at home. I couldn't go to conferences. My academic career, in fact, ended. The only thing I did was write books. So I wrote 50,000 pages of research books, good research books. And then suddenly 4 years ago, in this ridiculous, mythical way, a man saw her limp outside a coffee shop, and, "Do you have rheumatoid arthritis?" "My wife does." And he was so filled with emotion, he talked to us as strangers and poured out his wife's cure at a hospital by this guy Niwa. Go look him up. And he had 5 books, and I thought he must be a quack, and this is placebo stuff. But the books were breathtakingly logical, more than Harvard and Jack Deming Burke Jr. at Harvard. Much better than the National Institute of Health thinking. Real smart doctor thinking, which is so hard in the world to find. And smarter than Chinese medicine. He had taken the best of Western medicine, the best of Chinese medicine, and very smartly combined it. Here he is, 80 years old, publishing 2 papers every year in the very top rheumatology journal in the world for the National Institute of Health in English every year, as an 80-year-old. And then having 14,000 patients in Yokohama and another 14,000 patients in Western Japan every year. And the world's highest cure rate for autoimmune diseases as a practitioner. And he cured my wife. And suddenly, 3 or 4 years ago, I was free to move. We waited a year and a half to make sure it was real and not a fluke. And then as soon as we both felt emotionally, this is real, this is not going to go, no backsliding on this, then I was liberated to move. We both moved to Tokyo immediately to move up 200 ranks in university, because that's the best you can get in Japan. And then we're prepared, and I got active academically outside of just writing books, so that I could begin to work for better institutions outside of Asia. And